Hi, welcome to Neuroverse, a podcast hosted by Carolina
and Clara, where we discuss all matters from neuroscience to philosophy and beyond. Welcome back to Neuroverse, and welcome to another episode of our series, Tools for Looking into the Brain, which is in collaboration with Scientifica, where we discuss all sorts of neuroscience methods and techniques and the reality of academia. And today we will be hearing about the trials and tribulations of starting your own lab from Dr. Elisa Galliano, a neuroscientist, lecturer, and principal investigator at the University of Cambridge, who has semi-recently very much succeeded in starting her own lab. We'll hear from Elisa about her scientific journey in a second, but just to introduce a little bit about her background, Elisa first obtained a bachelor's and then master's degree in neurobiology in Italy at the University of Pavia, where her first interest led her to investigate cellular and synaptic computations in the cerebellum. She then moved to Chris de Zeeuw's laboratory in Rotterdam, Netherlands, for her graduate studies, where she expanded her training in cellular as well as systems and behavioral neuroscience. Following that, she became a Sir Henry Wellcome postdoctoral fellow and spent 4 years investigating experience-driven plasticity in neurons of the olfactory bulb and how plastic modifications influence olfactory behavior in Matthew Grubb's lab at King's College London and Venki Murthy's lab at Harvard. In May 2018, she started her own lab at the Department of Physiology, Development and Neuroscience in Cambridge, and in October 2020, she joined Fitzwilliam College as a fellow and director of studies in biological natural sciences. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your current research and how your scientific journey led you to this topic?
Yeah, so we are working in the lab on what I have very doggedly and single-mindedly been working my entire career, which is plasticity. Neuronal plasticity more in general, not just synaptic plasticity, but any way in which a neuron can change. And by changing its electrical computation, its shapes, its synapses, then this can lead to either adaptation or learning, among many other things. We still work in the olfactory system because we use mice as model organisms. And I do believe that the olfactory system is the best system you can work in a mouse because they are macrosmatic, nocturnal, afoviate animals that mostly rely on smell to go about their business. And we use a blend of techniques going from very old school histology and electrophysiology in slices to then setting up automated behavior training, in vivo imaging, all the various toys, and that's why mouse again is very powerful, to try to understand how neurons change and why do they change, and does it matter which neuron in a circuit change if you want to maintain a stable behavior versus if you want to learn something new.
I definitely share that interest in plasticity as well, and I think it's the most fascinating thing to study in neuroscience. So related to that, when did you know that you wanted to start your own lab and specifically on this topic?
Yeah, again, perhaps I'm a little of an unusual guest because the normal answer that people would say is that it was being an incremental process, that you live and learn and you come up with ideas and you shouldn't know already from the beginning what to do. The truth is that I knew from the very beginning and I've just, again, never changed my mind, which maybe is a bit daft, but there you go. I decided to study biology age 8 when I saw the picture of a cell, my first science class, and I refined it to neuroscience at high school because in Italy you have to study philosophy at high school. And so philosophy and neuroscience are the same question, like how do we understand, learn, and think, just using different methods. So biology and philosophy combined, to me, do end up in being neuroscience. So I decided that I want to do neuroscience then, and again, just luck. The following year was when I was supposed to start university. The third year in which the University of Pavia started a master degree in neurobiology, actually. Neurobiology was called at the time. And so I decided to just, start with a bachelor in biology to then transition directly into neurobiology. My roommate was a year ahead of me, first year uni. I was a medical student. And he had to go to get extra credit to some seminars in the evening in one of the colleges in Pavia. Pavia is a bit like Cambridge and Oxford, there's colleges. And these were a series of lectures on learning, memory, and synaptic plasticity, which were given by this professor of neurophysiology called Egidio D'Angelo. I was just bored because I had no friends, This was the beginning of first year of undergrad, so I tagged along. And in that one talk, that was like literally month 1 of year 1 of undergraduate, I said, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And I just did that. I appreciate that this is unusual, but sometimes when you know, you know. And there you go. I just refined the techniques, the model system, the model circuits, and the method, but the question has remained the same all these years.
Amazing. It's such a incredible story, and I love the dedication, and that, at 8 you knew, and then first month of undergrad you knew exactly what subfield of neuroscience.
Some would, describe it as psychotic, but there you go.
Okay, so following on from that, you knew exactly what you wanted to do. Did you have no fear in this process, or did you have any sort of doubts or fears in the process of actually applying for PI positions, etc.?
So you see, ignorance sometimes is bliss. I come from a very non-academic family. I'm in fact the first person in my family to graduate from university, bachelor. Mm. So I had no framework about any of it, none. That takes away a lot of fear somehow, because if I had known back then the amount of work and luck and etc. that it is, getting to this point would have required, maybe I would have done something else, but I had no clue. And so I just, again, head down, I just worked towards it. Maybe this is also a touch of arrogance. I assumed that if I worked hard enough, I would have gotten it. I was not expecting it to get it in like a, old school prestigious place like Cambridge. That's also not why I applied to Cambridge. It was another very fortuitous thing. But I thought, okay, somewhere in the world, somebody will have me. I know I can teach. I already knew that I could teach. That also helps. And I can work. I can get stuff done. So I think it became apparent to me that things were going to be a bit hard going from PhD to postdoc, because I had to get my own fellowship, my own money to do the work that I wanted to do. I didn't just apply for a postdoc. My partner and I were in the Netherlands at the time, and I decided that I wanted a change. I was a bit bored of, the lifestyle. Let's put it like that. And I asked him, can we move? Yeah, we can talk about it. Okay, I decided we move. Where do you want to go? You decide where we go. And in no time at all, he said London. It's fine, we go to London. And then I went about looking in London, which lab would allow me to do the science that I wanted to do. And I found Matt Grubb's lab. He had a wonderful website. He had absolutely no money to hire me. He had no interest in hiring a postdoc. There were no postdocs in the lab at the time. It was 2 PhD students and a technician. And I wrote him an email out of the blue. At the point I was working still on cerebellum, and this guy was working on development in the olfactory system and accentual segment plasticity, so completely different. Wrote him an email, very long, and I told him, you don't know me, but I want to work with you. I know you don't have any money, but I have looked at way in which I can get the money, like fellowship A, B, and C. Can we please talk? And within 12 hours, he replied. It was just, I said, let's talk. And then I came to King's to do an interview, which wasn't an interview because there was no job. And I stayed in this place where we are recording this podcast for the first day that I visited for 10 hours straight, from 9:30 in the morning to 7:30 in the evening, talking to Matt, talking to the lab, giving a seminar. At the end of it, we have decided that we were going to do it. But there was still no money. The problem still persisted. He managed eventually to find 6 months of money for me while I was waiting for the outcome of the fellowships. And I applied to 7 things. He applied to a grant to pay for me. I applied to 6 fellowships. Then all the usual one, EMBO, Marie Curie, HFSP, all the big, because I was eligible for everything. I was moving country. I was changing field, And the first 5s were all no. At that point, I made my partner relocate to London already. I was finishing my PhD, which is insane. We decided to make this massive move with 6 months of salary. And then the last two were yes. And so it worked out. At that point, I started to think, and just to clarify, the project was the same, the sea was the same, the host was the same. That gives you, again, an idea of how much of it is luck.
Yeah.
And that's why I started to realize maybe this is not going to work. Because it doesn't matter how much I work, how much I try, it may be luck. And that was the first inkling that things may indeed not work. But then the luck persisted, and that was that. Yeah, we'll touch again how I got the job that I have was another immense stroke of luck. But I think the other time in which I really thought, okay, maybe this is not going to work, was during the pandemic. Because I got the job in Cambridge in May 2018, but the lab, actually the first students came into the lab, masters and undergraduates, in October 2018. So by when we closed down in March 2020, we had literally just finally, got a mouse colony going, got a setup going, got something working. And we had to shut down, and I was left with nothing. The students left. I had just recruited a PhD student that started in October 2019 at that point, my first PhD student. And, so you go into lockdown. If you're a big lab, if you're, fourth year into your postdoc, you have got lots of data to analyze. You can, can do work. We couldn't do anything. We had we had literally no data. And so he decided, after a lot of thinking, to stop, because we also didn't know at that point. I don't know if you remember. You didn't know when we were going to be allowed to go back and what was going to happen. And then we did go back, and I had no students. The master student at the point had also finished. No student at all, basically no mouse colony, because it was completely decimated at that point. No lab space, because we weren't allowed to have two rigs in the same room, so also had to find new lab space, move the rigs, etc. And then for a year we were at reduced occupancy. So I had another PhD student starting the following October, which was October 2020. And we could be in the lab only 3 days a week tops. And I had to train her to do patch clamp from 2 meters distance. Yeah, so those years were tough. And I thought, I don't know actually if I'm going to make it. Because at that point, I didn't have even a tenure track job. Then I got a tenure track job, certainly not tenure. And how the heck are we going to publish anything? Or, I didn't have a big grant. The teaching got insane because all of a sudden everything had to go online. So the amount of time that you put into, I teach a brain histology practical to second year undergraduate. Make that online in a month. That was interesting in April 2020. So those were tough years. We came out the other end, mostly due to, again, stubbornness and perseverance, especially of my first PhD student that stayed. It was just a fight of will. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And then the next PhD students came, etc. That got better. So I think that starting a lab in those scenario, I wouldn't recommend. So what I can convey about this process is also skewed by the particularly rough circumstances in which I had to start. So take it with a grain of salt.
Amazing. Well, firstly, just to go back on what you were saying earlier about how a lot of the application process is just luck. I find that so refreshing because I think a lot of people do have that experience, but it's not really talked about enough. And how the key thing is to just keep applying, and that a lot of times it's just a numbers game, and don't get put off by any of the no's, to just be stubborn and just keep doing it. And also hearing you describe your experience setting up your lab during the pandemic is just so brave, and really shows your commitment and determination to know this is gonna work regardless.
I don't know. I think this is a massive personality flaw. I decided to do that, therefore I'm gonna do it. So sometimes I should just stop and evaluate. Is this actually a good idea? So I don't know. Maybe that was a point in which I should have stopped. I'm not saying that what I've done is the right way to do it or what should have happened. What I wanted to convey is that mine is a success story in a way, and so there is a lot of survivor bias in everything that I'm saying. I was just lucky. Stubborn, yes, but also incredibly lucky. I'd add to that, though, that I think it was Pasteur who said it, chance favors the prepared mind. You need to do your homework. So yes, apply to all these fellowships, but do your homework. Don't copy paste. You need to tailor everything. And it's true for fellowships, it's true for grants, it's certainly true for PI jobs.
And could you tell us a bit about how finding PI positions work? Because I know it's a bit complicated. Well, I always find it complicated in academia because you're applying for positions in certain faculties, in certain universities, but you're also needing to get funding for your research, which sometimes comes through that, but sometimes it's external. And how did that work for you?
Yeah. So again, total luck. Let's take a step back 1 second. Getting a PI position process is not applicable in every country. It completely depends where you're looking for a position. So I mostly know the UK system, the US system, because I was in Boston when I actually applied for jobs, and a little bit the European system. But in the UK, there are at least 3 different types of way in which you can become a PI. The old school way, that's what I did because I'm an old school person, you apply to a university. And your job, ideally, is going to be tenure track, and it's going to consist mostly of research. Approximately 60% of our duties are research, 30% of teaching, undergraduates, postgraduates, whatever they throw at you. And the rest is administration and, committees, stuff that nobody wants to do, but you got to do to keep a university running. Mm. In the UK, that comes with pretty much no money to start up your lab. The startup package is like in the tens of thousands of pounds. So what do you buy? Like 2 mice and, a coffee machine for the lab, pretty much.
The essentials.
Yes. Yeah. But this is not because they're trying to, cheat you or anything. This is just how the system works, that there is no money towards big startups, which means that you're going to have to fundraise and get a big grant for that. The other way is to join a research institute, like the Crick Institute in London or the Laboratory for Molecular Biology in Cambridge, or there's like Max Planck's or, Janelia Farm. Those are not universities. Those are research institutes, which means that there is no teaching. There is a lot of money to start up. You're only going to be doing research. But most of these positions are time limited. For instance, at the Crick, if you're appointed to 6 years. You can be then reassessed and renewed for another 6 years, and then you're out. Janelia is 5+5, the Sainsbury Wellcome Centre in London is something similar, Max Planck's are similar. So the idea is that they want to keep the workforce fresh. They want to give you a start on your career when, new ideas, new things. Then you are maybe in your mid-40s, perhaps with a family, perhaps with a partner, and you got to find a job. And so where do you need to go? And you need to go find a job in a university. But guess what? You've never done the full job, which is also balancing research with teaching and admin. So you are appealing because your research is great, but your ability to be continuing to do great research with no money and a lot of other duties is unproven. And you're very expensive because at that point you're not, a postdoc transitioning anymore. The final way in the UK that I know of is to get a career development fellowship, like a career development grant from the Wellcome Trust, from the Medical Research Council, things like that, to start your own lab. Those used to be like the Wellcome Henry Dale or the MRC New Investigator. They used to be 5 years. They pay your salary. A university has to host you and offer you space, and they can't ask you to do teaching or stuff. But then after 5 years, you are out of a job. Either you get another grant or you get a tenure track position, or you're again out. And I think that, in my opinion, that is the worst possible option, because you are time limited, but then going in a place that is not a super rich and fancy research institute. Mm-hmm. So the facilities are not going to be superb. I'm generalizing here. Maybe there are places, but my decision not to go that way, which is what everybody told me to do, was because I did some maths. How long does it take to do an in vivo mouse neuroscience paper?
Years.
So the answer is no, average 5. I've done the work. Okay, so if your fellowship is 5 years, you come in, you have nothing. How long does it take to buy equipment, install the equipment, hire people, train people? Mm-hmm. Okay, so already you're out of the 5 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're completely on top of that, you need to publish not at the end of year 5. That's when you need to have secured the next grant or the next job. So you need to have published really at year 4, because then in year 5 you need to be looking for the next thing.
And after you buy all the equipment and set it up, you take about another year to get the behavioral paradigm to work. So that's 2 years.
But even the slice physiology, the opto injections, you know, I mean, we started with old school slice physiology because I had no money. So, you know, when you have no money, go electrophysiology. That's my say. It takes time, even just to convince people to come work with you. Again, once more, you're completely unproven. Because you may have proven yourself as an experimentalist, as a experiment doer. So you're a young postdoc that needs to find a job. Why would you go to an unproven young PI? It's a massive risk. It's a super massive risk. So hiring doesn't take a minute, you know, it's a long process. And then, you know, this fellowship used to give one postdoc. So you and one postdoc in an empty room. You're lucky if on day 1 you have an empty room. Often you still need to get somebody that used to have that lab to empty the space before you know. So I don't know. I think that funders actually realize this. That's why, for instance, now the new career development fellowships of the Wellcome Trust are 8 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the Institute do 6+6 or 5+5. I think that there has been a realization of this. I also don't want to denigrate people not working on in vivo mouse. I think even if you're working on Drosophila genetics, it still takes time. It just takes time. So I decided to, well, it was very random once more, but I wanted the old school stuff. Again, I'm a kind of working middle class person from a non-academic family, so the goal is that at some point you need to have a permanent job. That was always the goal. So I decided to go for the old school path, knowing well that it came with all the problems of not having a startup. The mistake that I made is that I applied too early and I was too lucky. So this is another really random story. I was in Boston in Venky's lab in Harvard in 2016. I was sharing an office with somebody that became a friend, and he's from Austria, and I'm Italian. And I was trying to convince him to come back to Europe to open his own lab. Like, come on, you know, then we can hang out. And we were just literally being daft in the office. And I opened the Fence job website. It's like, let's look if there is, because it was a bit ahead of me. Let's see if there is any jobs that in Europe you can apply to. And this job in Cambridge came up. And it was for a neurophysiologist that could also teach histology and development. And I looked at him like, that is me, not you. This was not a tenure track job, it was a 5-year non-tenure track job. I had not understood this fully at the time, but anyway, I was in the beginning of the 3rd year of my postdoc. I had published nothing for my postdoc, of course. I talked with both Venky and Matt, my bosses, as like, I mean, there's this job, it's describing me, but I have not published anything. It's too early. I still have 2 years of fellowship. And they told me, you should apply. You're never gonna get it. But it's absolutely fantastic practice because you're gonna get your documents in order. I mean, Harvard in this sense is fantastic. They tell you that money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you many other things. We had a fantastic person there whose only job was to help postdocs preparing their documents and tailor them to, you know, CV and cover letter, I mean, and research pitch, etc. for the job. And so this person helped me, and I had this very polished CV, cover letter, teaching statements, you know, those kind of things. And I sent them, and I got an interview. And it's like, okay, fine, let's practice the interview. And because I don't do things halfway, then I really practiced that interview. And then I went to Cambridge. They offered me the job. I applied to one job as practice.
Yeah.
And I got it.
Incredible.
But you were not done with your postdoc.
I wasn't done with my postdoc.
Okay.
So I asked them, like, can I please just delay this? Because, you know, you never, first rule of grants, you never return money.
Yeah.
Also, I need to publish something.
Yeah.
And they were so kind to let me do that. So the only thing that they asked me to do is to do some teaching, to just go a couple of days to do some teaching. But that's when I delayed it. So the job was offered to me at the beginning of 2017, and then I delayed it until mid-2018. So in the meantime, I actually did publish something, which was good. Not everything, but eventually we published the rest. And that was an incredibly lucky and dumb move at the same time, because it means that I had no comparison. I had no idea what to ask for. I had no idea what a salary should be, what a startup should be. I had zero clues. So basically, I ended up in the absolute worst position because I had a time-locked job in a university with a lot of teaching commitments and absolutely no startup.
Yeah.
No people.
Yeah.
And Venki told me, like, you're crazy taking it. And Matt told me, it's a Cambridge job. You don't say no. and then I don't know. I don't know why I said. I guess because it's a Cambridge job and you don't say no. And so I didn't say no. And my arrogance again shone through. I thought, okay, fine. If in a year I've not convinced them that they need to give me a tenure track job, then I quit. I'll do something else. I'll do different. But I was convinced that it was going to happen. Again, I didn't know how any of this worked. How do tenure track jobs comes about? Somebody needs to retire or die. So somebody retired.
Okay.
Somebody. And within a year of being there, I applied for the job. I got in as internal candidate. I got absolutely zero discounts. They made me apply same as everybody else. And I did not get the job. I was ranked second. Because the person that was ranked first was like 10 years ahead of me career-wise, and it was one of these people that was in a research institute. Had been in a research institute for like 5 + 5 years, whatever, in Vienna. Is now a friend. He got the job. And then he decided not to take the job because, of course, he didn't just get that job. He also got a much, much fancier job somewhere else. So I was the second choice and the job reverted to me. So that was in then 2019, and then I started this tenure track job in 2020 with the pandemic, which is like fantastic, amazing. Finally, after this 1 year, I got into this job, which is a tenure track job in a university.
So what does that mean? What is a tenure track job? Like, how many years do you do that? What do you need to show for?
So tenure means that they can't get rid of you, but tenure track means you need to get to that tenure moment, right? So in the UK, it varies. It's quite long. In the US, it's even longer. I believe in the US is 7 years. In Cambridge, it's 5 years. 5 years of trial period. It's pretty clear what you need to show. You need to show that you can do the job. What does it mean? It means that you need to be able to sustain an active research program. You got to get money for that. You got to publish papers for that. You need to be able to supervise and deliver. It sounds like very gynecological, but deliver PhD students and postgraduate students, right?
In 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
You need to teach. And the teaching ramps up. Normally you start with what is called a honeymoon period, which is the first year or two. You have very little, and then it ramps up. And you need to get good student feedback, and you also need to show that you are, not just delivering the material, but creating and innovating and doing things like that. And then you need to do your admin, which means you're going to have to sit on some committees, you're going to have to examine PhD students, you're going to have to, do what needs to be done, like host seminars, go give talks, all of these things. It's pretty well spelled out, actually. So the problem is really the papers, because how long it takes to get papers. But again, it's spelled out, but there is flexibility in the system. So the pandemic indeed didn't help, but eventually we got stuff done. And I now have tenure, which means that they can't get rid of me. But this is the more important thing, is that it means that you can actually start thinking really long term for your research, for your collaborations, even for your teaching. Like, what do you want to develop long term? And, for big projects in EDI space or anything that you want to do within the university or anything else, because, I'm going to be here. I think it gives it also to hire people, to hire PhDs, so that you're going to see this through, right? And that's really important.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you keep specifying how lucky you've been, and while I appreciate that there was luck involved, I also definitely see how, like, your personality and stubbornness has assisted in your journey. And, like, you may call it ignorance, but I see how you have to believe in the best happening to allow you to take those risks and accept where you will end up and go with that.
So I don't know, I am not, my friends would certainly not define me as an optimist. I believe in myself. Which, I don't know, this again goes very much against grain of being a woman, being, non-academically, raised or anything. But I just know who I am. I know what I am willing to do and sacrifice. I know what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And I think I can assess a situation in front of me and adapt quickly and do what it needs to be done. Like, I have this tenure document in front of me. Okay, what do we got? Let's do it. Or I start on a non-tenure track job. What do I need to do for these people to want to keep me? Mm. And again, people in good faith give the absolute worst advice, because a lot of advice that I've been heard given to friends that were on these, career development fellowships in universities, like, you need to protect your time, you need to never say no to the teaching or the committee or whatever. That's rubbish, because you're never going to get a job like that, because you're proving that you are not a team player, that you are not able to handle the 3 strands of the job, and you're just not a nice colleague to have. Because every time I ask you for something, you just say no. Yes, you also need to learn to protect your time, but you need to do it in a strategic way. And I don't know, I always like to think about this as a chess game. I don't really play chess, but I understand the principle. You can't think next move. You need to already think 10 moves ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And put yourself with a lot of empathy and emotional intelligence in the shoes of the person that is going to give you the job.
Yeah.
Like, what do they want? And then you build yourself up to become appealing for that.
Mm-hmm. And do you enjoy the teaching? Because I know a lot of people tend to go into it on one side, either enjoying teaching or enjoying research, and not many people seem to actually want both. What is your experience with that?
I think that's also for me besides wanting a secure position, I really love both. I started teaching when I was at university. I was already teaching. I taught in every place where I've been. When I was here at King's, I was demonstrating neuroanatomy. I co-taught paper-based tutorial course at Harvard. I was there with a friend. I always taught, and I love it. And I think that teaching makes you a better scientist. But I really truly believe that. It forces you to clarify, but really crystallize concepts. If you can explain them, then you really do understand them. And now, like, for instance, now one of the favorite things that I teach is for a first year block of lectures for natural scientists in Cambridge on comparative sensory physiology. So I need to teach all senses across all animals and plants.
Wow.
And I'm an olfactory neurophysiologist or cerebellarian. So I knew very little about mechanosensation or vision or such. So, and I mean, this actually directly inspired a paper that I did with undergraduates in the lab. It's comparing different sensory modalities. So I really think teaching is fantastic. And it's also, so one problem of this job that I wanted to really talk about is that the first years of having your own lab is just, you want to have a break and a win, and they don't come. It's like, procurement, animal licenses, trying to hire. It's a ton of jobs that you don't want to do, you've not been trained for, and nothing is actually happening and going for you for a long time. So teaching gives you that hit of success and engagement with others that I find I really need, because giving a good lecture and having some students understanding some complicated concept, I mean, that's actually good. You go home and you think, okay, I've done good work today. And the other thing that is really missing from the first years of having your own lab is community, because you go from being a PhD student, a postdoc, an undergraduate, you are with your cohort, you are with your friends, and then you are in charge of the lab. You may have people in your lab, but they're not your friends, they're your students. You can be very, friendly terms with them, but it's a different career stage, it's a different dynamics. And it depends on which department you go, but there may not be many people at your career stage. So there may be some very senior colleague that offer mentorship, but it's not the same as community and solidarity and, just ranting about how absolute dispiriting and crap the whole process is, but we need to persevere. And so one of the things that I did with a colleague, we are postdoc together here at King's, and we started in Cambridge more or less at the same time. We realized how much this was lacking, the sense of community. Also, everybody was coming in and also a bit reinventing the wheel about how to go about and, start a lab, find about PhD programs, or, And so we started first informally as coffee mornings, and then more formalized as an actual school-recognized network. a group that we call the Early PI Network. And it's like people that just started in Cambridge, either on tenure track positions or fellowships or whatever. And we were just meeting to offer mentorship and peer support. And that was really priceless. I really think that was priceless. And also, when you start something, you always need to think about, okay, what's going to be the outcome of this? You need to have how do you measure success of this initiative? So one of the things that we did was actually to create an induction document for how do you run a lab. I got the air conditioning in the room that doesn't work. Who do I talk to?
Yeah.
But like very dumb things, but also high level things. How do you write a grant that gets funded? And, things. So I found community and teaching were really, really, really beneficial at the beginning. And I'd say, try to protect your time and try to do your research, but also try to do something in your week that gives you some sort of joy, because otherwise, Christ, it's very hard.
Yeah.
It gets better. It gets better. It gets better.
I guess it's good in a way you framed it as such a positive thing, because then you have research and teaching to like balance out. Whenever you're feeling down, you choose the one that gives you the most joy.
The one that gives me the least joy is procurement. Procurement, I can't stand. I'm a very bad manager because I hate those tasks. Hiring is annoying. The paperwork of it is annoying. It's very tiring because you're making a big decision for you, but I also feel such massive responsibility for the people I'm interviewing always. Am I making the right choice for them? But I don't mind as much. This is also one of these things that nobody tells you, that when you become a PI, most of your time is spent evaluating either people or science. So you evaluate papers, you evaluate grants, you hire. I also do undergraduate admissions in my college. You do postgraduate interviews. I shortlist for postdoctoral fellowships. It's a lot of evaluating, and so I think that comes besides with a headache, is really also some kind of emotional labor to really try and make the right decision.
Yeah, and a lot of responsibility.
Yes. For undergraduates, I feel it even more. For undergrad and postdocs, it's like, okay, if they really don't like this, they can just, leave. But yeah, the ones that they need to get a degree at the end of it, it really needs to be kind of a good fit. For hiring, the one thing that I would say is that hiring as a new PI is super hard because, as I mentioned before, you have not proven yourself yet, but you're also not visible. So one of the must-do things that people really got to learn and do is just make a bloody website and make it look properly, People will join you for your science, yes, but they also want to know which kind of human you are, because at the end they're going to have to see your mug for like 4 years, 5 years every day. They're going to spend more time with you than probably with their loved ones. So you need to gel as people. Yeah. And I come to believe that there are some bad people. There are some toxic people. That is true. But most of the time it's just a very bad fit. People that don't match, they communicate in different ways, they have the different expectations. It does not match. And I think that if you put out very clearly on a properly made website what your science is about, but also how your lab is run, which kind of person you are, that simplifies a lot. And also I find attracts quite a lot of people that are more the good people that you want to attract, because they're more similar to your way of working.
I have to say, so I joined like a brand new lab for my PhD. Like I was the first PhD student to join, and the website did make quite a big difference, because even though I did my rotation and that was very informative, like on the website my PI also wrote like what he expects of us, what we should expect of him, what like a lot of stances and opinions on like many things, and that really helped me like gain an insight that you don't often get from day-to-day interactions or interviews, so I do massively agree with you, and I really think PIs should make more an effort for that.
PIs don't understand that the job is 90% communication in oral, written and graphical form, because that's what we do. We write grants, we write papers, we give talks, we teach, and we make figures, we make data look nice, and and social media too. Now we have all migrated to Blue Sky, which seems to be very nice at the time. I never had any social media in my life. I despise them. But for science, Twitter became necessary. And now, let's not go there, but Blue Sky is the same thing. And I joined Matt's lab because of the website, because he was very famous for this Nature paper that he did Hamburane on AIS plasticity in 2010. It's impressive work, sure. But I didn't want to do that in cultures of hippocampus. I wanted to work on olfaction. I wanted to work on something else. And he had not published very much on that yet. He was working in his new lab, so I joined also kind of a new lab. It was very clearly laid out on his website. It was evident what the science was. He didn't have at the time, this is kind of more new, like a philosophy or lab ethos page, but it permeated through the way in which the team plays, like he described himself, and it was something about cricket, and I don't know, it really was massive decision making moment. And then the science, because then you also can see all the old papers that this person has done. I think one of my favorite paper of Metz was an older paper, a neuroscience paper. It was a proper physiology paper. It was even from strontium use when he was a postdoc in his previous postdoc. So, websites matter, and making them good matters, but also I think if you have listened so far, you probably have realized that I am not everybody's cup of tea as a person, and I think it's very important that people know this. I have very, very strong opinions, and I'll uphold them. And one of the very strong opinions that people disagree with is about publishing, and I don't publish on for-profit journals. So I will never send a paper to Neuron or Nature Neuroscience in my lab. I also don't review for them. So if you join my lab as a postdoc, you got to know this. Because if I am serious about trying to change the culture around publishing, and I hate hypocrisy, which is what most of my peers actually end up doing, they say, oh yes, it's very bad, but then we keep on sending the papers to these journals, then it's never going to end. So that if you join my lab, even if you have a Nature-worthy paper, we're not going to send it to Nature. Sorry. We're going to send it to Science, Society Journal. Great. Hopefully they take it. We're going to send it to eLife plus Biology, Journal Neuroscience. So we send it to, people that don't make a ridiculously large profit out of this. And I think if you have clear values, you have to spell them out, and then people can decide if they are aligned with theirs or not. I think having very clear values about that, about hiring, about public engagement is another thing that we do a lot of. About working hours, about way of working. Like, I don't accept people working from home. Sorry. Because I don't think that that's how a team is built. Of course, there are going to be time in which you have to analyze a ton of data and you're working from home. And this is very controversial, but I think that if you're doing science in a small team and you're starting your career, you need to be there to learn from each other and to really try to do things most of the time. Not all of the time, but really most of the time. Of course, you also need to balance into that, caring responsibility. This is a different story. I'm just talking about in general. If you have things that you believe in that are very clearly spelled out in your head, first of all, and then in your website, then decision-making becomes easy. Because you may be faced with a lot of gray scenarios, but then if you go back to the values, like, okay, what am I going to do? Yes, no. I'm going to do this collaboration, and I'm going to hire this,
Yeah, I think it's really important what you said about communication, because even if some people may have these values in their heads, if you don't communicate that, you might end up having people in your lab who are not even aware of these things, and then, you could have rifts because you haven't been clear about it from the start. But going back to attracting people when you've just started your lab, how do you kind of balance, like, attracting people and selecting people? Because I guess you would have maybe less of a choice than if you were like a really well-established lab. But then where do you draw that line?
This is something that we endlessly talk about with my peers and with my colleagues, right? And it's hard, and I don't have a definitive answer on this. I ended up hiring for enthusiasm for the topic and fit with the people, more than skills. It's a difficult thing because you start your own lab, and in your head, your lab is going to be like the super fantastic postdoc lab that you're just coming from, which has, 5 postdocs, 7 PhD students, all the equipment, etc. That's unrealistic. You may get there in time, but it's not going to be immediately that. equally, you're not going to hire the super hotshot PhD student that just published 2 super high-profile papers on the same topic that you work on, using the exact techniques that are going to be immediately, relevant for your work. Is just not realistic, right? So you need to hire people that care, in my opinion, deeply about the scientific questions, because then they're going to go above and beyond to learn whatever they got to learn to make it work, to answer the question. I was working on a completely different topic at first sight, which was cerebellar in vivo physiology and behavior, and I went to in a lab that was doing structural homeostatic plasticity in the olfactory system. So in development, like different techniques, different things, patching same. But I cared about the topic, and I think I convinced him about that. So I am hiring literally based on commitment to that. I know that some of my colleagues absolutely disagree, and that's a valid stance, because they really want to have somebody that is technically skilled. But I don't know. I think getting somebody that is specifically technically skilled in that very complex thing that you want to do, like for instance, we're buying this 2-photon microscope to do 3D light patterning in vivo well imaging, which is, okay, nobody's gonna come that has that. There's so few labs already that do it. What are the chances of somebody that's done a PhD in those labs wanting to come to do this in my lab, working on weird plasticity and olfaction questions? Very low. And so you need to try to find somebody that has the interest in the question, enough knowledge. Like, I think you need to be quantitative, yes, that I also need. Some people that can handle numbers. Not necessarily coding per se, but just understand numbers, understands, how you design a statistically sound experiment, and, not scared of analysis. And then you come up with a training plan and summer schools, and I'm in the lab, and I'd like to get to a point in which I am not the most technically skilled person in my own lab, because I'm getting old, I'm losing my eyesight from close by, is really bad. This middle age is not, I wouldn't recommend, but also I'm just busy. But I think it takes time. I've been told by people that it's a bit like a startup. You can't go from 0 to 100 immediately. And same goes for papers. I was given a very good advice at a random dinner during a conference by a senior PI. She told me that one of the things that she regretted after starting her lab was aiming immediately for the super high profile paper. The first paper had to be a high profile paper, which she ended up being, but it took her 7 years to publish this paper. Indeed, 5 years is not enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I think you need to publish something smaller, faster, because you need to show both the community and prospective lab members that you run a functional lab.
Mm-hmm.
Because until you publish something, you need to show that you can take a project from conception to delivery.
Yeah.
And that's what also probation is about, that you can do science. Doing science means having an output, and the output is the paper. And that's, I had to do that because I had no money. So we did smaller things, and we became very creative with doing things with no money. And we published things, but, I'd like to believe that I would have done the same thing even starting with a big grant and with big money, because I think that was very good advice. And the other good advice that I got is always have an asymmetrical distribution of risk, which means both in projects and in people, have something safe, have something that will work, and try to give this certainly to younger students, because they need something for their thesis, they need to graduate, right? Mm-hmm. But then also give them maybe a crazy project that if it works, like it's a splash, but it may very likely won't work. For postdocs, you need to ask them, what do you want? For them, normally they need the splashier thing to get a job, even if I am living proof that is not necessarily true, that you need a splashy paper. By the way, I never published a Cell Nature Science paper. I never even published a Nature Neuroscience or a Neuron paper. So you can do it without those things sometimes. So maybe for a postdoc, I would go more on a more risky, more high level paper. But for the lab, you always need to have both, so that you keep on ticking on.
So my overall impression is that you need to be juggling the whole time, like juggling different types of jobs, juggling people and everything. It's such a multifaceted job being a PI, and whilst I appreciate you had so much training beforehand and you're very skilled in your neuroscientific techniques that you use, what sort of training opportunities are there for PIs? Because I know this is a general problem. People don't get management training. They don't know how to manage people, or even teaching. They never get taught how to teach. And yeah, just what sort of training opportunities are available. And also, like, if you wanted to start up a new technique in the lab, how does that work?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. So the simple one, learning how to teach. Some people are naturally gifted, but you still need to know something about pedagogy. I learned formally how to teach by volunteering. During my postdoc here in London, I volunteer for a fantastic charity called the Brilliant Club, in which puts PhD students and postdocs in schools and, deprived areas, and, kids often on free school meals or things like that. Smart kids didn't have a lot of opportunities to think about science in university, and you develop a 6 weeks course for them on your research topic, which was fantastic. And with that, before they teach you pedagogy for a weekend. There's a couple of weekends of training of what is a learning objective, how do you assess. So those kind of things. Learning to manage people in the lab, I think everybody should already do it. At the very least, during the postdoc, every postdoc should supervise an undergraduate final year project or a master student or a PhD student even. I did a lot of that. I started managing already during my PhD. I was managing master students. Talk to your boss and, but also then, ask them to teach you how to supervise. It will become very important when you apply for a PI job to show that at least you have you know how to deal with a person in the lab, teaching them a technique. Learning to manage and to lead are two different things. I didn't learn, I sort of made it up. Asked a lot of questions to a lot of people. And then, way too late, I did the fantastic EMBO leadership course for PIs, which is a great resource. I should have done it at the beginning, but no money, pandemic, etc. I would recommend that absolutely, lab leadership, because it's really targeted to science labs. I found general courses about management not good because they assume that you have access to actual money or power, and you don't. So I kind of, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
But just ask questions, pester people, ask questions. And I don't believe in having a mentor. I think you need to have many, many, many mentors, and you need to just steal from multiple people the things that are good at. And there's people that I know that have helped me immensely on how to teach, and people that learn me how to deal with students with problems in the lab, and how to recruit, how to interview. So you need to be a sponge and have a vast network, and just, in order to do that, you also need to, again, go back to the point of not always saying no when somebody asks you something. You need to build some goodwill so that people will be willing to mentor you.
Yeah.
And technique-wise, I had to do in vivo to photon imaging. I never done it before. And so one thing that was fantastic is that Venki allowed me to go to one of this super intensive summer school. The Cold Spring Harbor Imaging in the Nervous System summer school. It was 3 weeks. I wanted to die at the end of it. I was so tired. There are very many. I would say that's a fantastic way to do it if there's the money to do it. Otherwise, there are short-term fellowships, like EMBOS, for instance, as one, to do a short stint in a collaborating lab. So you can be there for like a month or two to just learn. Mm-hmm. I think as a new PI, go with what you know, because there are so many other challenges that, go with what you know. Collaborate. Mm-hmm. Learn also to select collaborators that you trust, their values are aligned, you communicate well, etc., etc. So I would bring in a new technique to collaborations. For instance, one of my PhD students is actually based in Iceland because I have a collaboration with Peter Peterson's based at the University of Reykjavik. Too long of a side story how we got there, but he's a genetist and more a molecular person, so we brought in things like that. I collaborate a lot with my next door neighbor in Cambridge, as easier as Jasper Port, which is a vision neuroscientist, very much of a more coding behavior kind of perspective, sensory driven always. Collaboration is a fantastic way. If you have a year of sabbatical leave, some universities, that's also the beauty of university, you can just take a year in which you are excused from your duties, and you can maybe go yourself to a lab for some, or just do a sabbatical in your own lab. And pick up some books and some articles. There are now all these methods, articles, even with videos, One thing that I've learned during my PhD is that you can learn anything. just sit down and ask questions and try. And otherwise, the other way is to hire a postdoc that has done it before. It's tricky because you got to be really sure that this person you trust them, they're competent, and this person really should be fully independent because they can't rely on you by definition because you've never done it before. So that for me would be the last choice as a new PI.
Yeah.
The more you progress, you can do maybe more of that. Not done it yet. We'll see.
No, but I like that you brought up collaborations, because whilst that's useful for you, it's also useful for others, and it's just useful for science in general. So
neuroscience is now so interdisciplinary. Like now I am desperate to find a computational modeling collaborations. And so I'm also going to targeting a little bit more conferences along those lines because, I can't do it all. I would like to have control over the science that, we do in my lab. I want to know how it's done. We also release all our data with full data sets, etc. So there needs to be accountability. And I don't have the energy or the youth anymore to become an expert about another massive thing, right? So collaboration's good thing.
On the topic of I can't do it all, I often times try to do it all, and it can all just get a bit overwhelming. So I agree with you that it's really important to be part of the community and say yes, and especially if you're new and young, to take up opportunities. How do you balance work life and also like within the work, when to say yes, when to say no?
So I am the worst person to ask about this because I have not, work-life balance is a thing that I still have not learned. Okay, I have no kids. I never wanted kids, and this has helped immensely my career, and I think this needs to be acknowledged that I had it easy. Decisions for me were made easy by the fact that I didn't want to have children, so I could move to Boston for a year and a half, and I also had a very understanding partner that we just did long distance 3 times, and it's fine. And also somebody that works very hard, so if you have caring responsibilities, I think people that do that and do this job are superheroes, because I have no idea how they do it, because if I look at the amount of hours that I put in and then the amount of I don't know. So this I cannot give any insight because I don't know. I can tell you as a person that never had that challenge, I still find it challenging just even to just maintain friendships or go to the pool or do stuff that is not work. I think that you need to learn that this is a marathon and not the 100 meters, so you need to pace yourself, you need to force yourself to take some holidays. And when I go on holiday, I don't work, I don't bring the laptop. I physically do not bring the laptop. I remove Outlook from my phone. It's just, I don't work. Once I even left the phone home, I just brought a burner and I gave the number to my mom in case there was a problem, and that's it. No internet, wow. Seriously.
I like that.
That was after COVID. That was, I needed a break. I also don't bring work home. So I stay in the office late, but I actually physically leave the laptop in the lab. So what I've learned during the pandemic is that because I was working from my living room, kitchen, open space situation, this is really bad. Yeah. Because it blends and it bleeds into each other, and then you never stop thinking about work. So I'm trying to do some housekeeping in my head. This is work and this is no work. It's hard. And again, if you have kids that you need to pick up at a certain time and feed, I appreciate that this is not possible. So I know that this is not universally applicable. This is just works for me. And the other thing that you got to learn is that done is better than perfect. And just some tasks, you just need to get them done. Most admin just needs to be done. You need to become very good at understanding what's urgent and what's important and work accordingly. And just get the other crap done fast. It doesn't need to be a work of art every email that you write. And when to say yes and no to colleagues, again, I'm very bad. I tend to say yes a lot. But because I think I also benefited so much from so many people's goodwill that I feel very bad. I also care, but it's hard. It's really hard. At some point, you need to remember that you also have a duty to your students in your lab. And so you need to reserve some time for that. So sometimes I say no, I force myself to say no by saying, okay, no, I really need to actually look after my own PhD student. I cannot also do this PhD Viva because I have to help my own PhD student to finish writing her thesis. Or, I don't know, guys, it's hard. I honestly think that the work the workload is unreasonable. I also believe that all these soft jobs, this mentorship, this helping, disproportionately fallen to women. This seems to be true, unfortunately. They are mostly unrewarded. It doesn't count towards your, for instance, very much towards your probation, etc. But I see a nugget of beginning of change towards this. I hope that your generation is going to push further for this, because you can't do science without doing mentoring, without examining PhD students, without doing, committee work, or without reviewing. Nobody wants to review anything anymore. It's like, well, because nobody can, So I think that we need to get to a point in which it's a bit more manageable, because frankly, it ain't.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think you need to learn to fail and be happy with that.
Easier said than done.
I used to follow on Twitter somebody who's the daughter of a basketball coach in the US. It's called Erin Calipari. She runs a lab at Vanderbilt, and she used a lot of sporting coaching metaphors for that. I am like the most uncoordinated person in the universe, so I don't do sports. But I think that actually helped me a lot to understand athletes' mentality and coaching mentality. When you lose a big game, like when you lose a grant or a job, etc., you got to allow yourself to be absolutely bloody miserable for like a day, an hour, however, and then you need to brush it off, forget, and go forward.
Yeah.
Move forward. Yes, you acknowledge, you learn you need to analyze it, learn from the mistakes, and stop wallowing in pain and misery, because most of this job is failure.
Yeah.
It really is. Of experiments, of grants, of many things. Find a way to cope with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me also a little bit about one of the messages when we did the episode with Mary and Ashlan.
Yeah.
Where just because you fail or you've made a mistake doesn't mean you're a bad person. And I think as scientists, we get so emotionally intertwined with our work that it can feel like that. So yeah, I think that's a really good message.
Yeah, no, you are a person who happens to be doing science and loving doing science. Science does not define you. Waking up, getting up every day and trying again defines you. Not the failure, not the, also, you need to fail always in different ways, because if you keep on failing the same way, you're dumb. Just at least learn something from your failure, pick yourself up, find a community of people that you can just moan about it for like a day, a week, it doesn't matter. Pick yourself up, go. If not, if this is not something you can do, my opinion is that this is not the job for you, because it make you very, very sad and very unhappy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa, and sharing your crazy stories and advice.
Yeah, thank you, Elisa. It's been so insightful and honestly such a breath of fresh air. I feel like you were able to impart a lot of knowledge and advice that I haven't heard anywhere else, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, guys. It's great. The shock on your faces when I was talking was nice to see. Also, please remember, this is just a personal perspective, and my advice is absolutely not universally applicable. And it's just an opinion and a person's story. So everybody does their own way. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed and you had fun. Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, check us out on Instagram at neuroverse_pod and check out our website, neuroversepod.com, for more information. This episode was also part of our mini-series that is sponsored by Scientifica, who is one of the leading producers of electrophysiology tools and has a great resource center on their website, so be sure to check out Scientifica's website for more information as well.